Have you ever asked, why won't my children listen to me? Or even more than that, how can I get them to want to listen to me? Well, that's what we're here to answer today. Hi, it's Krista here from Moms Find Truth. And let's jump right into the topic today. So, it's kind of been established that there's, in very broad terms, 4 different types of parenting. Obviously, every parent can fit anywhere in the spectrum, but to just generally categorize them. And I go a lot more in depth into those 4 types, where I land in that, where some other very popular parenting types land in that. In my most recent podcast, I'll have it linked down below if you'd like to listen to that and hear a little bit more. But to back up even a little bit more broad than that, I think we all kind of think of parenting on the spectrum of permissive to authoritarian. So strict to hands off, per se. And I think often, if you can put a line directly in the middle of that spectrum of parenting, I don't believe we're ever called to be on either extreme, but I believe God demonstrates qualities from both halves. For instance, I believe that it is very important for us to be aware that when we disobey God, there are massive and sometimes even eternal consequences. To understand the severity of sin and the importance of consequences and choosing what is right. But God is also a loving God who demonstrates patience and forgiveness, graciousness in his communication with us. So, my 2 tips, there's kind of a frontline one and then a backup one, if you will. Both equally important for establishing the skill and the conviction within your child to listen to their parents, to authority. So, solution number 1, that frontline solution, the one we should be implementing on a daily basis and should always be our first go-to, is daily intentionality when it comes to developing the relationship with our children, to getting a hold of their hearts. It's not just about the command and authority, it's about the relationship and the heart, which again is exactly what we should be emulating to them if we are emulating Christ. There's an analogy I like to use of tying strings between us and our children, and what it takes to tie those strings and what it takes to cut those strings. And I dive deeper into that in the video I did on teaching your child to obey. It's linked down below. But another aspect of this is to truly listen to your child, to be emulating what you want them to copy back. And really having a respectful style of communication with them. And I dive into that deeper in a video down below on teaching your toddlers to have manners. But bottom line, if your children feel like they have a good relationship with you, that they have trusted you with their heart, that they feel respected by you, and that you are desiring to listen to them and be involved with them, that you care about them at a very core level, already they're going to be much more inclined to want to listen to you. Just organically desire that. So again, that relationship, I think, is what all of us parents want with our children. So that's one reason it should be the front line. But also, we would all much rather organically foster that desire for them to listen to what we have to say over being the authority that makes them. But then, to truly fulfill our job as parents, there needs to be a follow-up solution to that as well. Because one of the biggest roles that we have as parents to our children is to teach them to obey and follow Christ. So if we are not taking obedience from our children extremely seriously, we are doing them an eternal injustice. And our children are commanded by God to honor their father and mother. And turning a deaf ear to your father and mother is the opposite of that. Making your father and mother work extremely hard to try to get your attention and keep your ear is incredibly dishonoring and disrespectful. So again, God commands us what to do in life, but yet he communicates that in a loving way, and he tries to woo us and win us over to obedience. But if we do not obey, there are consequences. Why? Because God is a loving God who wants us to learn to obey him, because what he calls us to do is what's best for us. And he wants what's best for us. And that same thing applies to us with our children. We want to woo them and win them into a relationship with us. We want to respect them and show them an example of what we want them to emulate back. But if they still choose to be disrespectful, we need, as their parents, to teach them the importance of obedience to their God-given authority and ultimately to Christ. By obeying mommy and daddy, they are obeying Christ. By honoring mommy and daddy, they are honoring Christ. And if they choose not to do that, they are disobeying Christ. And in order to literally preserve their souls, we need to take our job extremely seriously when it comes to establishing in our children's hearts the severity of sinning against God. So when we are establishing what behavior, when it comes to obedience and response to parents, we want to see in our children, I think we should first step back and see what expectation God has of how we respond to him. And that is how we can lay out our definition of obedience and really understand what our expectations should be for our children. And I dive into that a lot deeper in the video that I made, linked below, on how to teach your children to obey. Really how I came to the definition that I did and how to implement that into your life and your children's life. So once you've established that, I think we can all say, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that ignoring your parents or not giving your parents attention when they are speaking to you is wrong. It's disrespectful and it's dishonoring. So first, in establishing obedience, I would make sure that you have been extremely clear in communicating what your expectations are, not just with obedience, but specifically with listening to mommy and daddy. What does that look like? With eye contact, with responding, with immediate obedience. Really lay out for them what your expectations are so that at no point you're labeling it as disobedience when really it's just a misunderstanding. Be abundantly clear, step number 1. Step number 2, especially for working with young children, in the moment of wanting them to listen to you, if you start speaking to them and they are not listening to you, first check that there's no distractions. I have one child in particular that I will be talking to him for quite a while, and all of a sudden I realize he did not hear a single word I just said. And I get a little bit frustrated, and then I realize he's playing with toys. He didn't look at me one time. He didn't respond in any form or fashion. He just zones in. Bottom line, he zones in. And once I touch him on the shoulder and call out his name, boom, he's looking at me. He's focused on me. I can repeat everything I just said. He does it immediately. We're good. That's not disobedience. I'm distracted. It didn't click that you were talking to me. If it had, I would have been right there, but it didn't. Step number 1, make sure there's complete understanding. Step number 2, make sure distractions are removed. You have their eye contact. You know beyond a shadow of a doubt that they know that you're talking to them and that they know they should be listening right now. And then also, step number 3 would be making sure you're entering the scenario with a good attitude. It's even if you have a bad attitude, it's not okay for your children to be disrespectful. But again, I think we need to also take responsibility for our part that we're playing in this whole communication moment. So if we're entering with a bad attitude, yes, our children are still commanded to honor their parents, but we could help them a little bit here by starting off with a good attitude. And so if you have double checked those 3 things, they have understanding, distractions are removed, and you're entering in with a good attitude. If they still are choosing not to listen, then we've entered disobedience territory. And again, to fully follow through on that, I would refer you to the video I posted on teaching your children to obey. I dive into consequences and definitions and the whole 9 yards. But for now, I just want to put this forward because requiring obedience, especially immediate obedience, talking about punishments or discipline, consequences, or parentally induced consequences, is considered rather taboo in this day and age. And if you haven't learned already on my channel, you will soon learn that does not sway me. What's right is right and what's wrong is wrong. That doesn't change based on society. And emulating the example we've been given from Christ is never going to be wrong. Now, can you take that example and twist it and abuse it? Yes. Have many conservative Christian parents done that? Yes. But if you are in God's word and you are communicating with him on a daily basis and you are following what he has set out in his word in your parenting life, it is never going to be wrong, no matter what society tells you. And to dive into that topic a little bit more, I've actually put out a podcast talking about how it's okay to be different. And I think most of us as Christian moms understand that and would agree with that, but living it out in our day-to-day life can be pretty tough. And so having some of that reinforcement, I think, can be really helpful. But bottom line, at the end of the day, parenting's tough. I would say one of the toughest jobs out there. Not necessarily physically tough, although there are seasons for that too, but just overall, physically, emotionally, mentally, it's tough, y'all. But I'll tell you what's tougher. Finding out at the end of time, when we're standing before the judgment seat of Christ, that our children ended up in hell. And that we could have done something about that. If we had become less concerned about what the world thought about us and our parenting, and became more concerned about what Christ thought. On that note, I'll see you next time.